when you engage in a creative act, what are you filling up or fulfilling, or what muscle, as you put it, are you using? I would argue it's your soul. If we let our souls atrophy because we're not doing anything that, have been fulfilling to human souls for thousands of years, what does that ultimately mean? We atrophy our souls and creativity and that spark that makes us human, and outsource it to AI, and then it becomes a new religion. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It makes me think of the Greek myth of Narcissus, where he falls in love with his falls in love with his reflection, and I think it's that would definitely be a way that gets us to that post-human future, and it's something I think people should resist.
Many people have issued warnings about the dangers of artificial intelligence since generative AI like ChatGPT became all the rage in 2022. When ChatGPT was released in November 2022, it was an instant success and reached 100 million active users in January 2023, just 2 months after its launch. This made it the fastest-growing consumer application in history at the time. Many celebrated this powerful technology, completely oblivious to the many risks it poses to humanity. Fortunately, its inventors and prominent advocates like Elon Musk began speaking about how artificial intelligence would soon surpass human intelligence and create a new breed of humans merged with machines. This sent instant warning signals, and people began to look more critically into this miracle invention that threatens to completely wipe out the human race as we know it today. One of the top dangers of AI, which longtime proponents like Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO, have discussed at length, is how artificial intelligence will replace the need for humans to use their intellectual abilities. They glowingly discussed how, in no distant future, artificial intelligence will be able to help humans achieve even the simplest mental tasks so that they have absolutely no need to think for themselves. While this might have sounded advantageous for people like Schmidt and Kissinger, after all, it is their greatest ambition to see the human race conquered. It raised further red flags about this all-powerful invention. But the dangers of artificial intelligence far exceed brain rot and intellectual degradation. It threatens the very foundation of human existence in more ways than you can possibly imagine. In a recent interview, popular investigative journalist Whitney Webb discusses one more eerie and unimaginable danger of artificial intelligence: the atrophy of our souls because we've outsourced everything that makes it whole. Whitney warns that by leaving all our mental and creative activities in the hands of artificial intelligence, we run the very high risk of becoming the very same soulless half-machine, half-human beings that people like Kissinger, Schmidt, and Musk have been talking about for ages. This is, without doubt, the biggest threat to human existence in history, and we are walking right into it oblivious, misinformed, and ignorant. As we present clips from Whitney Webb's interview, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications bell for more videos. You can also drop your comments and observations in the comments section below, as it helps with the YouTube algorithm so the video can reach more viewers. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
Yeah, so I would encourage people, if they want to essentially know what's planned in that scenario, to go and read the book written by Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO I mentioned earlier, and Henry Kissinger, called The Age of AI, Our Human Future. So essentially there they frame a lot of stuff as warnings, but if you have any idea into who Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger are, and what they've done in their careers, they don't really seem like they're very concerned about some of the impacts they claim to be concerned about to me, but that's just me personally. But there are some things they say in there that objectively do consider careful consideration. So one of those is that, AI will they say, invariably lead to a division of society. Essentially, they don't use this term, but I will use it, into classes of haves and have-nots. But the way they define it is a little different. So sort of this more elite tier would be the people that determine AI's objective function, that program and develop AI and understand what AI does to people. And then the lower class presumably would be much larger, and that is the class that AI will act upon, but people will lose the ability to know what AI is doing to them. And they argue that this process of people losing the ability to know what AI is doing to them will happen because of this phenomena they refer to as cognitive diminishment, which is sort of this idea that's pretty easy to verify. If you stop doing mental math and use a calculator all the time, it gets harder and harder and harder to do mental math. And the same is true for really like any skill that you don't practice. So they argue that because of the convenience of AI and how it's been creeping into our lives, and I think we've seen this a lot since the advent of generative AI, it will become harder and harder and harder and eventually impossible for people to do certain things, including make decisions for themselves, because the AI will tell you where to go. It will tell you what music to listen to. It will tell you what clothes to buy. And essentially, that's their vision. People will eventually lose the ability to make those decisions for themselves or even develop their own preferences without the assistance of artificial intelligence. And so obviously the way to fight against that is to not outsource all of your decision-making and skills to that. And unfortunately, I think as we've seen with the rise of generative AI, people are creating less. People are outsourcing their creativity to AI, have AI make art for me, have AI write things for me. And eventually that leads to a world where in a generation, people don't know how to create art or create music or write without AI. And what does that ultimately mean for humanity? Then essentially we do end up in sort of this helpless state where we become dependent on machines to function. But it only happens if we voluntarily give ourselves over to that type of system and decline to use the abilities granted to us by our consciousness and our souls, and decide to let machines do it for us and have them become the creators and have us just be processors for AI, batteries like the Matrix. I mean, I don't know, but I'd rather not see that come to fruition. And I think the way to avoid that is very easily within the hands of anybody, regardless of your economic status or what your skills are. Everybody can create something. Maybe you whittle things out of wood. Maybe you make music. Maybe you make art, visual art, or other, woven art. I don't know. There's all sorts of things people do. People have always been creating ever since we've existed as a species. And I think if we surrender that, then the post-human future would be an inevitability. And that's essentially what these people are hoping for. And I think it's important for people to fight against that. And I think when people talk about resisting this agenda, this is something that inherently gets left out of that discussion. And I don't think it should be at all. Because again, I don't think people are really reading what a lot of these architects of AI policy are thinking and saying. People are just willingly using it because it's convenient, it's easy, but without really thinking about long-term consequences. And I'm sure people that have been using generative AI, I don't know, in independent media to generate content for your site, has it gotten harder to write those things after using it for a year? Probably. For those people, I would wager. And that type of phenomena is only going to get worse. And what happens when we can't even think for ourselves anymore? Because stopping creating, not being able to write, eventually you're not going to be able to think without the help of this algorithm or whatever. And again, as I mentioned earlier, AI is prone to hallucinating, seeing realities that aren't there and all sorts of things. And how deep could we get dragged into some sort of artificial illusion if we sort of outsource our thinking and our creativity to this type of entity? It's kind of funny because Schmidt and Kissinger argue that these hallucinated realities, AI seeing realities that humans can't observe, mean that the reality must be real because AI is so much more intelligent than us, so that we should believe, whatever it sees that's unobservable. And I don't know, maybe that could be true in some instances, but since there's no way to verify, do we really want to shape society around what could be hallucinations of some, human-created machine just because certain people that are powerful in society have an almost religious-like devotion to artificial intelligence? I don't think that makes any sense.
Whitney has not just discussed the problem. She has also discussed the importance of fighting back and doing it in such a way that the globalists' agenda is put to shame. Though the brain is not a muscle, it can be trained like a muscle by learning new things and engaging in mental activities. And what happens when you stop training a muscle? It atrophies or degenerates. The muscle tissue gradually breaks down and decreases in size and strength due to the body not needing to maintain its mass when it's not being used. This leads to weakness and difficulty performing everyday activities. So, when you become as dependent on artificial intelligence as these people preach, your brain, which is arguably the most important organ in your body, simply begins to waste away from disuse. This is why Whitney says the best way to fight back is simply to keep training your brain. Use it as frequently as possible so it does not waste away like they want. Though this might seem like a ridiculous thing to point out, this is, unfortunately, what it has come to. Let's get back to Whitney's interview.
When you engage in a creative act, what are you filling up or fulfilling, or what muscle, as you put it, are you using? I would argue it's your soul, right? If you just have AI make it, the person that's making it doesn't get the same type of feeling they get if they actually like engaged in the act of making art themselves or with another human, you know? So if we let our souls atrophy because we're not doing anything that, you know, have been fulfilling to human souls for thousands of years, what does that ultimately mean? You know, it's interesting in that same Schmidt-Kissinger book, they basically say that AI taking over will lead to one of two consequences. One of them is that the peasants rise up and overthrow the elite. That's one scenario, and probably not the scenario that Schmidt and Kissinger want. And then the second scenario is that AI spawns the creation of a new religion. So out of those two allegedly inevitable scenarios per those people, obviously I think it's quite clear, if you're familiar with the backgrounds of Schmidt and Kissinger, the outcome they want is that it creates a new religion. So we atrophy our souls and creativity and that spark that makes us human and outsource it to AI, and then it becomes a new religion. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It makes me think of the Greek myth of Narcissus, where he falls in love with his narcissist, falls in love with his reflection, you know. And I think it's that would definitely be a way that gets us to that post-human future, and it's something I think people should resist, because you know, there's something important about humanity. There's obviously a reason that there's sort of this push to sort of snuff that out, and I think ultimately it leads to a world where humans are just easily controlled and essentially either harvested for data, harvested for energy, harvested for something, and not creators anymore. And it's up to anybody if they choose what path they choose to go down, whether they're going to go down the path of someone who creates and can manifest, and who can, you know, actively do things and actively make decisions and have preferences and do these things that ultimately are part of what defines humans, right? Or if they're going to go down the path of I'm going to be lazy essentially and let these machines do everything for me, but then you become either not necessarily even part of the machine, you end up, instead of the machine serving you, you end up serving the machine. And I think that's how we get to digital slavery quite fast if too many people take that path. So I think there's a lot of things people can do to, you know, resist these agendas, but I think that is a very easy and important, very important thing for people to do and consider. Well, I have how I live personally. You know, I personally don't use it at all, but you know, I have a great assistant that helps run my website, and you know, a huge part of my business, who's an amazing person, and she finds it very useful for certain tasks. And I'm certainly not going to judge someone for using artificial intelligence. But I think, again, it's that slippery slope thing. How far down the, if you don't use it, you lose it thing, do you want to go? And obviously, I think there's ways to interact with AI where you're not really at risk of necessarily succumbing to that. But I think there are use cases where people may be. And it really ultimately depends into how connected you are, into how suggestible you are as it relates to your, your devices and your apps and things like that. So, you know, I'm not really in the business of judging people or telling them how to live their lives. Me personally, I just don't really have a place for it. I never plan to use it in my writing or for my research. As I mentioned much earlier in this podcast, I sort of started off doing, like farm stuff. I like being outside and not necessarily always in front of a screen. Obviously, doing a lot of writing and work over the past few years, I've been on screens a lot more than I definitely was in prior phases of my life. And I think at some point I'd, like to get back to that. And I don't really can't really think of anything personally in my life where I find AI very useful, but I know that's not the case for everyone because not everyone has the lifestyle or career or preferences that I do, you know? But I think, again, it's people need to have red lines about this type of stuff, and just be aware of the risks. And if there's skills you have that are important to you, do your best to, maintain them. If you want to use AI occasionally because you're in a pinch to generate something, that's not going to screw you over long term necessarily. But if you become reliant on it and that's all you use, and then after a year or something, yeah, you probably will see a difference. And, their vision, the Kissinger-Smith vision, is that this will happen on a society level, and that people will become, as they say, cognitively diminished. That does not sound positive. That does not sound good. So if you choose to use AI, I would urge you to make sure that you're not cognitively diminishing yourself, whatever that means for you.
If you're still skeptical about artificial intelligence and the dangers it poses, here is a video of Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, talking about how AI will lead to a reconfiguration of the entire structure of society.
I still expect, although I don't know what, and this is over a long period of time. This is not a like next year or, the year after, that kind of thing. But over a long period of time, I still expect that there will be some change required to the social contract, given how powerful we expect this technology to be. I'm not a believer that there won't be any jobs. I think we always find new things to do. But I do think like the whole structure of society itself will, be up for some degree of debate and reconfiguration.
Remember, Altman is the same person who brought us WorldCoin, the crypto project that wants to scan every human iris using its orb devices. After much criticism and scrutiny, WorldCoin recently rebranded as World Network, but still maintains its core offering of scanning irises and creating a global digital ID system. Quoting Altman's video on social media platform X, Whitney issued a dire warning. When the powers that be realized that many Americans would resist a great reset, they obviously noticed that most were expecting it from the public sector. So, its implementation is going to come from the private sector, likely via a public-private partnership. Public-private partnerships do not beget a truly free market. They beget crony capitalism and produce state-adjacent corporate monopolies and quasi-monopolies. Yet, expect that many of those Great Reset policy agendas to be marketed as free market or private sector innovation. Expect some media figures who claim to be against the Great Reset to now support its policies under different sales pitches. Vigilance matters most when many vocal opponents to these agendas have been distracted and/or pacified. What are your thoughts on Whitney Webb's interview and the many dangers of artificial intelligence? How are you personally fighting back against this menace and looming threat to the human race? Please share your thoughts, comments, and observations in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, also ensure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications bell for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.